Math Time with Ms. Hartzell, Module 7, Lesson 22. I can use a number line to show sums and differences of lengths.
All right, so friends, now that you're good at identifying the unknown numbers on a number line, we are going to use this information to help us find sums and differences of numbers. So just in case you have forgotten, when we are asking you to find a sum, S-U-M, we are asking you to add two numbers together and to tell us what happens when you put those two parts together. You'll find the whole or the sum. When we are asking you to find differences, that means that you are looking at one number on the number line and seeing how far away it is to another number, the difference or the distance between those two numbers. So stay tuned for your pause and think, where you're going to just take a moment to recall or remember everything you already know about number lines. Do your best today.
Pause and think for a moment about what you learned yesterday about number lines. Recall the information that we discussed, or remember. Maybe you can try to think what letter A would be on this number line by looking at the two endpoints and the distance between the numbers, and also the other numbers that are listed in this pattern. When you're finished thinking about what you've learned about number lines, press play.
All right, so like I said yesterday, we are going to again practice using the skills we learned yesterday and finding unknown numbers on a number line, but we're also going to add on to this skill and use the number lines once we have finished them to add or subtract numbers. So before we get into that, let's just remember or recall what we've learned about number lines and when there's some missing information. So all number lines are made up of a straight line with two arrows at the end. These arrows are just showing us that this number line does go on, but we have zoomed in on this part of the number line, okay? So we're looking at 120 all the way to 140, just that part of the number line. Some other information that we learned is that these vertical lines on the number line have a special name. They are called hash marks. So every hash mark that you see indicates that a number is being listed or a letter, which the letter tells us that we don't know that number yet. That's an unknown number, so we will eventually need to solve for that missing number, okay? And we also learned that the number lines have endpoints, okay? So we could call both 120 and 140 endpoints, but I like to call the first number on the number line the starting point, because that is where we're starting on this number line, and then we'll end with 140. So I call that second number at the end the end point, and the first number on our number line the starting point, okay? And then the last bit of information is that space in between those hash marks. Those are called units. Just like on our rulers, we have units of centimeters or units of inches or a unit of feet, and that means it's the space between each number, okay? Unit. So looking at this number line, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 units being shown. And I have some numbers also listed. I have 120, 125, 130, I don't know yet, and 140. So looking at all of this information and noticing my units, I can tell that the units are counting by fives. That's the pattern. So if I want to figure out what letter A is, I could solve it a couple different ways. I could start at 120 and I can count up by fives to find out this missing information, or I could look at the number 130 and the endpoint 140 and think in my brain, what number comes in between 130 and 140? What number is in the middle of those two numbers on the number line? There's two different ways to solve this. Either way can work. I can count by fives, 120, 125, 130. The next counting up by fives would be 135. And 135 is also that number that is directly in between 130 and 140, okay? So that's the learning that we did yesterday. So let's continue using that information as we explore using number lines to find differences. So here's an interesting number line. I still have 5 hash marks and 4 units in between my numbers. But this time, I don't know what the starting point is. I know that the end point is 95, and when I look at the pattern of numbers, I'm noticing that this pattern is not counting by fives, it's counting by tens. Okay, so remember, that's important. We got to always be looking at the whole entire number line and really critically thinking, okay? Because we don't see, like up here, where the pattern has a 0 in the ones place and then a 5, a 0 and then a 5, 0. When numbers are doing that, we know it's counting by fives. But when I look at this number line, it's not doing that. Every single number has a 5 in the ones place. But what's changing is the tens place. And how is the tens place changing? By tens. It's counting down by tens. We can be even more specific and say the pattern is counting down by tens. So then I can start at 95 and count by tens down, or I could start at 65 and count down by 110 to figure out letter B. So if I start at 65 and I count down 110, so that means I'm counting down back to 0, right? But I'm not going to get to 0 yet because this number is just 110 less than 65. And 110 less than 65 is 55. Okay? So that's kind of like the work we did yesterday. So how can I use this information to figure out the difference between 95 and 55? We've learned lots of different strategies for subtracting numbers, but this is another strategy that you could use. Instead of just doing vertical form and subtracting my fives and subtracting my tens, I could look at my number line, start at 95, and count how many units it took to get to 55. Because remember, on this number line, the units are counting by tens, okay? So count with me. 1 group of 10, 2 tens, 3 tens, 4 tens. So if I started at 95 and I want to know the difference between 95 and 55, that difference is 40. In order to go from 95 to 55, I would have to take away 40. So that's how you can use a number line to do subtraction. Let's practice with another example. So what do you notice? What information is given? What information is missing? We have 4 units listed on this number line. We have 5 hash marks indicating the 5 different numbers on this number line. We know the starting point. We can see a pattern, but we don't know the end point. It's being labeled with the letter E. So how do I figure out E? Well, use the information that you see. When you're looking at 100, 110, 120, 130, what pattern do you notice? How are these numbers changing? They are increasing. Remember, as we're looking at any number line, the numbers that are our starting point are going to be lower than our end point, because that's how numbers are listed. When I look at rulers, it doesn't say 30 over here. I start with 0, and then I increase as I move my finger to the right. Same thing with the number lines that we draw on our paper. We start with the starting point, which will be lower, and as I move my finger to the right, the numbers will increase. They will increase differently. Sometimes it will be by 5s. Sometimes it will be counting down by 10s, or that's what I'll have to do in order to figure out that starting point. But this time, our missing information is to the right. So we will be working to increase or add what? 5s, 10s, 2s, 3s? What is it? This pattern is counting up by 10s. That's what I'll have to do to figure out what is E. So when I do that, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140. That's the missing number, the missing endpoint. And I knew that because I found the pattern between the different hash marks. I found what those units were. The units were counting up by 10s. And so this time I decided to start at my starting point and count up by 10s. But I could also have started at 130 and just counted up one group of 10, since I was able to figure out the pattern, okay? So if I wanted to know what's 100 plus, I don't know, that equals 140. If I wanted to find that missing part of this addition equation, I could use this number line. How many times did we need to count by 10s to get to 140? Let's count. 1 10, 2 10s, 3 10s, 4 10s. So when you have 100 and you add 4 10s or 40, that will equal 140. So that's how you can use number lines to find differences and sums or parts of a sum equation that are missing. So today, while you are practicing on your daily practice and then your exit ticket, you'll have a couple problems like yesterday where you'll just be filling in some missing information from a number line, and you'll have a few questions that will address the target of using the number lines to find differences or sums, okay? And again, this is just another strategy to put in your math toolbox for when you're adding or subtracting numbers, okay? You can just do vertical form, but I want you to challenge yourself today and really try to use a number line or to look at the pictures that are along with each of your questions so that you can find different strategies for solving. Because again, that's what's really cool about math. There's lots of different ways to solve a problem. There's never just one solution. There could be multiple solutions. So challenge yourself today by trying this type of solution using number lines and taking a look at those units between your endpoints. Do your best today, and I will see you tomorrow for math.